Once again, welcome. We are at the Washoe County Courthouse for this special presentation, and Brent Adams, Judge Brent Adams, is our guest. Brent, nice to have you on the program.
Nice to be here, Bob.
20 years, you've been, you're the senior judge, and you've been doing this for 20 years, huh?
20 years as of the 4th of July.
From the old courthouse, I would imagine. Is that where you started, or was this?
No, right here.
Right here, it was going, yeah. What has changed in 20 years, Brent, with regard to the legal profession, the courts, and particularly in Washoe County?
Well, Bob, I'd say three big things have changed, really big. One is on the criminal side. In the last 20 years, we've just had a flood of drugs. Today in Nevada, in felony cases, about 90% of them directly or indirectly involve narcotics and alcohol. And so we've tried to develop drug courts and a therapy approach to help people change their behavior because, frankly, we can't afford the prison space and we can't afford the fact that they repeat their crimes over and over. That's been the biggest change in the criminal law. Now, on the civil side, the biggest change is that judges have become directly involved in helping people and companies and lawyers settle their cases. Formerly, the judge just sat on the bench during the trial and was passive in the process. And now, I've had, for instance, over 1,700 settlement conferences. About 90% of the time, when the settlement conference is over, the case ends. And that's been a huge development in saving people time and money and risk in civil cases. And then the final thing, of course, that's affected every organization of government, every business, is technology. And we're now a paperless court. Everything is electronically filed. And that's changed the way everyone in our legal system does business.
The settlement hearings, you favor that? I mean, that has been very good to speed up the whole legal process?
I love it. I think it's the best thing we've ever done in our legal system, because what happens in most cases is the process destroys the case. Most of the time, the cost of the process itself is greater than whatever is at stake in the lawsuit. And for instance, I'm the presiding judge in the business court. If you have a small business and you have the owners of that business in a legal dispute, by the time it's over, the employees have lost their jobs, the business is no longer competitive, and the business may be out of business. So the judge tries to intervene very, very early in the process to talk to the parties about their positions, their values, the costs and risks of the process, and most of the time we can create a tremendous savings by doing that.
20 years ago, did district judges hear what we consider to be today the family court cases? And is the family court a relatively new court, last 10 years, or how did that work?
Well, the family court's over 10 years old. When I started, each of the district judges had all the cases, including
everything.
What we call the family court. What's interesting is, even though our divorce rate is down, the family court caseload has increased 250% in the last 10 years. And that's because family court has taken on all sorts of treatment programs, education programs, management of family programs, and so it's really become kind of the social service agency of the court.
Brent, I was in, well, still am to some degree, in a very small way now, but I was in the advertising agency business for a lot of years, and I know one of the personal things that would happen to you if you did not get an account is that you say, gee, what did I do wrong? How do judges feel about getting overturned by the Nevada Supreme Court?
Well, I think those of us in the judicial profession understand that each judicial officer has a job. My job as a trial judge is to manage the litigation, to help people resolve their issues through settlement work, to conduct the trials, and to decide motions that are brought before the court. But we as human beings don't have the capacity to evaluate ourselves, and that's why we have an appellate process. And the appellate court, the Nevada Supreme Court, takes the record of what occurred, and they review it, and if they believe the decision has to be modified or reversed, that's their job.
As we are talking today with Judge Brent Adams, the hearing is going on in Washington, D.C. for a new Supreme Court justice. And I think that's kind of a very interesting type of thing. As you said, it will play out probably for a week. And my guess is that this lady's going to go ahead and be on the Supreme Court.
I think that's likely, Bob. She has the full support of the president. There is a strong Democratic majority in the Senate, which is the confirming body. She has had a superb legal education. She's had an excellent reputation for 17 years as a trial judge and as an appellate judge. So unless something really remarkable happens, I would think the consensus will be she's qualified to be a member of our United States Supreme Court.
What's the future of the court system here in Washoe County? Areas continues to grow, more and more cases. What do you see? And how long are you going to be around here as a judge?
Well, I don't know. I want to try to do this job as long as the voters will permit me and as long as I think I can be of assistance. I think as the community changes, we have to constantly try to do a better job of managing litigation. The rule number 1 of our civil procedure rules in Nevada says that these rules shall be applied to yield the just, speedy, and inexpensive determination of every action. Now, there aren't many people who describe our legal system as speedy or inexpensive,
Right, yeah.
but that's the goal. That's what we have to keep working on. So early intervention by the court, assistance with settlement conferences wherever possible, making the filing process for pleadings in the court more efficient. And then we've also got to constantly work on the family court, because in family court, over 75% of the people in those cases are not represented by lawyers. They're representing themselves. And while we want to give them access to the courts, we don't want to also permit endless motions for reconsideration that dramatically increase the dockets and don't give efficacy and meaning to decisions governing families. So those are some things we can do.
I know the court and judges particularly have to go by the law in other cases, precedent cases, but you see a situation and your emotion has to come into it. Do you ever say to yourself, well, the law says this, but I think it's a better way to go, to do this? Does that happen?
Well, you do. First of all, almost all cases are driven by the facts. There are very few cases where a judge says, I'm not sure what the law is, or the law has not made a statement on this particular subject. What's much more difficult is to assess the witnesses, assess the evidence, try to find out what's really going on. And then, if it's obvious that there's a justice of the case, if your common sense, your experience in life as a human being tells you this ought to be the result, then I think the natural inclination is to try to look for a way that is consistent with the law to reach that result. But ultimately you have to be governed by the law, and sometimes the law in its application is harsh, but the judge doesn't get to decide what the law is. If that were the case, the judge would have more power than the legislature. So it is true, sometimes it's regrettable, but you have to reach a decision that might not be what you think's right to do or what you would want to do, but what the law commands.
Judge, one final question. We talked a moment ago about that you'd like to serve as long as the people will elect you, which brings up an interesting. Did I see? I was doing very little research on the internet. We are one of just 2 states that can go out now and solicit funds from anybody, from attorneys, judges in this state. And I think recently you just took some action against that. Is that true?
I did. I've been very opposed to judges and judicial candidates directly soliciting money for judicial campaigns. I think that we need a balance between responsiveness to the people and accountability on the one hand, and the independence a judge needs to do the job of judging. In the legislature, for instance, if you and I support the same proposal, you contribute to me and you expect me to use that money to forward that policy. But judges are not policy makers. And virtually everybody who contributes to a judicial campaign is a lawyer or a party in a case coming before the court, and we need to change that. So here's what I do. First, I would prohibit judges and judicial candidates from personally soliciting money. They could do that through a committee
or something.
And that distances them. It reduces the coercion on the contributor. Secondly, I hope the people of Nevada will adopt Senator Raggio's proposal, SJR 2, which would have a merit selection process, an election in an open election, and then retention ballots every 6 years, provided that each judge would have to receive over 55% of the vote, and there would also be a performance commission to assure they're doing the job when they're on the job. And that way, I think we could bring more independence and integrity to the judicial process.
The appointment of judges, is that ever in our future?
Not entirely, no. We've got 38 states that elect judges. There are a number of states that have a modification of appointment and election, but I don't think we're ever going to see the time when a majority of judges in America are selected by appointment.
Thank you, Judge Adams. And I need to say in closing, do you know that you win the Senator Durbin lookalike contest? Senator Durbin, I was noticing that the other day. Saw Senator Durbin on television. I said, he looks like Judge Brent Adams. So you win, for better or worse. That's how we'll leave it.
The president was interviewed the other day by, it was a guy on CNN, Anderson Cooper, and he pointed out the president was getting more gray hair. He said, as long as you're my model, I'm okay. So as long as you're my model, Bob, I'm all right.
Judge, thank you very much, and our thanks
you.
to you. We'll catch up with you next time. Thank you for watching.